This is Jordan Tower with JT News. Make sure you smash that like button, smash that subscribe button. Let's get right into the news. Well, there's only one song that comes to mind during this Cassie trial. Well, I'm sorry, Diddy trial with Cassie on the stand. And it's, besides all the hitting and controlling, it's, she's a very freaky girl. Don't bring her to mama. First you get her name, then you get a number. Because honestly, this girl's a freak, bro. Okay. Now we're gonna get into her testimony. I mean, most people wouldn't stay for all this. I mean, this is insane. There's a part of her that wanted to please Diddy. She's admitted to that, and you know, it's graphic. So let's get into this. So we picked it up about halfway through. Let's finish off the day with Cassie. This is her getting cross-examined by Diddy's lawyer. So jury enters. Let's see. Let's go. Witness. Okay. Boom. Judge, if there's something that really needs to be done on cross after lunch tomorrow, I may allow it. We have to leave time to redirect. This witness is being responsive. So Cassie enters back in the room after a break, and the government says it's not evidence yet, talking about GX411. So B414. It's like this is more text. I love you. So you wrote, I love our FOs when we both want it. You felt that? Cassie says, loving FOs were just words at this point. I don't know what FOs are. To be honest. Combs was he says, Mr. Combs wrote you, I want to freak out right now. And you wrote that you wanted it too. You said, LOL, me too. Cassie says, I texted more than that. Then the Diddy lawyer says, but you did text to him. Mr. Combs wrote to you, Jules is available if you're into it. Then Diddy's lawyer says, you could have said yes or no. And you says, love you. Cassie says, there was no yes or no. Then they said, bring in 420. On page 2, Mr. Combs wrote, do I have your permission to set up some freaky fun? You wrote, ovulation. Cassie says, yes. Combs, here, what do you say? Cassie says, I asked which hotel. I must have called him in between. I don't want to assume anything. Then they said, he said montage. You said you could also go to Pleasure Chest. What would you get there? She said, sexual supplies. He says, what supplies? She says, lubricants, outfits. He says, have fun, impress me. You say, okay. He says, can we kiss? A lot? And what did you say? She said, yes. You wrote, I left the iPad. Cassie says, I don't know whose iPad this meant. Then Diddy's lawyer says, Mr. Combs wrote, I'll be there right after my session. This was June 2017. Do you remember arguments you were having at that time? Cassie says, not specifically. It says, here you say the game starts at 10 p.m., no breaking character to 8 a.m. Cassie says, this was a game a friend of mine told me, a way to rekindle your romance. Diddy's lawyer says, by doing something different in the bedroom? Cassie says, it's a whole thing, like getting into character thing. And then he says, Mr. Combs says, let's get some outfits, go to the sex club. Then they ask, Mr. Combs wrote, surprising package coming out of state. Why can't I reach you? What do you say? Cassie says, I was getting my brows done. Then the lawyer says, did you come to know Mr. Combs was leaving to a freak off to go see Kim Porter? Cassie says, yes. And he says, how did you find out about Gina? How did you feel? Did it upset you? Cassie says, yes. Gina's that the Asian girl that Diddy has. I think Gina? Is that her name? I thought her name was Ghana. I guess it's Gina. And he says, it prompted arguments? She says, yes, it did. And then he says, and he thought you were not faithful. What was his reactions? Cassie says, it was scary. Then he says, Mr. Combs wrote to you, let's do something different in NYC this weekend. For your information, Dave hit me. What does that mean? Cassie says, reached out. Then he says, and Daniel contacted you. Do you mean about a freak off? She says, I might have. Then he says, he tells you you better put me on VIP vibrate alarm or something. He's frustrated. You don't answer his text fast enough. Cassie says, right. Then he says, you tell him to come to NYC, understanding there could be a freak out. Cassie says, maybe. Then the lawyer says, you also saw the Book of Mormon? Cassie says, yes, and she laughs. And then he says, mass pleasure if that's a sex club. Cassie says, yes, I would assume. And then the lawyer says, he asks you, are you ready for tonight? What do you say? She says, yes, I have to go get some thanks. She says, it's not about how I felt, right? Because you were skipping a lot over there. Combs says, you are right? I said, what did you write? He says. And she says, as much as you think you're Bruce Willis, you're not. Your kids were babies when we started dating. Okay. Then they say, if you saw him on social media on vacation with, it was heartbreaking? It could be. I was 7 years in. So, like, basically on vacation with other girls, his family, and she wasn't included. And what about Gina? You wrote, I don't want to be a side piece, but I'll treat you as a king. And then he says, you wanted to be the main girlfriend? She says, in 2013, I did. You saw social media posted Mr. Combs with other girlfriends and got angry, right? She says, can I speak? I was jealous of certain situations. He says, did there come a time he suspected you were in a relationship with anyone else in the industry? Mr. Cudi? She says, yes. Mr. Combs thought it could be good for your career if you collaborated with Kid Cudi. I mean, Mr. Cudi. She says, yes. This was when he was popping, like around 2011 to 13. That's when Kid Cudi was really popping. And then she says, then he asks, when did you begin your relationship with Kid Cudi? Cassie says, we enjoyed each other's company. Were you in a relationship with Mr. Combs? She says, we were on a break. Then he says, but you were still doing freak-offs with him. Cassie says, yes. See, this girl's different, bro. Then she says, after Mr. Combs found out by going through your phone, you went to see him. You knew he was upset. He previously attacked you. Cassie says, yes, I thought I'd be safer with other people there. Then they took a break. Then they come back, 2:38 p.m. Okay, let her back in, blah, blah, blah. And then they start asking her questions again. Your affair with Kid Cudi was only a month long, but you got a burner phone for it. She says, yes, I did. Diddy kicked you in the back? She says, yes. Then he says, this came up a little later relationship that you had cheated on him with Kid Cudi. Cassie says, he brought it up quite a bit. Then they said, when he cheated, he said, well, you had a affair with Kid Cudi, right? She said, sometimes. And then they ask, he suspected you of having an affair with another person in the industry. You were in when you were in South Africa filming, right? She says, yes, honey, 3. And then she laughs. While you were, she should stop laughing because the jury's going to look at it like, oh, she doesn't seem so sad today. You know, she seemed very sad the last 2 days, but now she's like, ha ha ha. While you were there, you saw a photo of Mr. Combs and Gina, and you were irate, right? Cassie says, very angry. He says, you blocked him and focused on the movie, right? She said, I tried my best. Mr. Combs suspected you of a relationship with whom? She said, Michael B. Jordan. You sent a video not only to Mr. Combs, but also staff who, D-Rock? Cassie says, yes. You sent that to them because you were angry with all of them. Cassie says, I was hurt. I spent my time with them. You thought they were all in on it? She said, the physical abuse, when did your father learn about it? Cassie says, same time as my mother. So she did have her father in her life and her mother, and she's still a freak. Did Mr. Combs come to Connecticut to speak to your parents? Cassie says, I don't know if it was then. Then they said, Carrie Morgan knew about the abuse? She says, yes. Then they say, the eyebrow gash incident, what was that about? Cassie says, didn't answer the phone and went to sleep. I was supposed to be packing for a trip. He was inebriated, they ask, and she says, I don't remember that. And then he says, why were you asleep? She says, a drink at the Abbey had something in it, I guess. What? Did Mr. Combs ever abuse you while he was inebriated? Then say he didn't remember it. Cassie says, yes. Did you feel sleepy? Did you feel like he was not taking responsibility? She says, yes. For drugs, you'd both go to rehab? Cassie said, rehab wasn't really a thing during our relationship. The freakoffs were the opportunity for you to take drugs together, right? And Cassie says, yes. You went a lot to Burning Man? Cassie says, yes. Did you ever call yourselves Get High Partners? Cassie says, we did. Did you take drugs without him knowing it? She says, yes. What was his reaction? Cassie says, explosive. Did he tell LA dealers not to deal with you? Yes. Man, this is boring, right? Let's see. Okay. You told Miss Coram that you learned only after the fact that Mr. Combs had dangled Miss Bongolan off the balcony. Cassie says, I am not sure. They ask, were you on drugs? She says, I'm not sure. Then they ask, you got a life coach for your drug use, according to this document. Cassie says, I don't know who that person is. They ask, you were doing a lot of drugs. Cassie says, it was a rough time. Then they ask her, you tried to get into rehab at Golden Door? Cassie says, it was a spa. There was a time where I lost all sense of smell, taste, and woke up in the hospital with an IV in my arm. I tried to get help. Yes, the time after San Bernardino, you learned that he had overdosed. Cassie says, a very strong opiate, yes. Were you not addicted to painkillers? She says, we took ibogaine. He asked, where did you get it? She said, Cancun, Mexico, separately. She answers that. And then they ask, when Mr. Combs threw you off the boat in Cairns, when he accused you of taking drugs and squeezed your leg. Cassie says, among other things. But you still wanted to be with him. She says, I did. Then they switch topics. When you and Mr. Combs went for guns to find Suge Knight, do you remember telling the government that you did go with him? Cassie says, no. Then he says, let me show you. And the government says, just for the parties. Cassie says, I did not go with them, so I don't think I said that. Then the lawyer for Diddy says, you also did drugs with Miss Morgan, right? Cassie says, yes. Do you recall telling the government that you did not set what he did? Hitting her. Oh, wait, you did not set what he did, hitting her in the head with a wooden hanger. Cassie says, I saw the hanger. I saw you was angry that I was doing drugs with Carrie. Then they said, so you broke up. This broke up your 17-year relationship with her? Cassie says it did. Did you tell Mr. Combs about the relationship with your now husband? No. Huh. Okay. Then it says, Miss Morgan took you and Mr. Combs to court and made a demand for money? Cassie says, made a demand, yes. The government says, and you paid a part of the demand for Miss Morgan? She says, I did. And you hadn't spoken with her since? Maybe this was like... So she got hit with a hanger, I guess. This was her friend. And they paid her off. To like not like report them. Then would you heat up the baby oil? This is all over the place, man. Like this is like a frustrating case. There's no streamline of anything and no order. It's just like, hey, yeah, you ended a relationship with your friend. Did you heat up the baby oil? You know, it's like out of nowhere. It's like she's like, yes. Now this is from the day before the Intercontinental Hotel incident. And then the government says, this is a long document. We need time to read it. Then they take a break. Then they come, we're in the home, let's see. We're in the home stretch of the day. Let's get the jury back. All rise, blah, blah, blah. And they say, so this is from March 4th. AUSA with UCT time. It is March 3rd. Okay, Mr. Combs refers to accessories. And then Cassie says, for the premiere. See, they're all over the place with this thing, man. It's like, you sent him an explicit message. She says, yes. He responded with a number of M's. He wrote, too bad you have to work. Cassie said, he did. Then the lawyer for Diddy says, you ask him, are you feeling better? Then he's discussing bodily functions. She says, yes. Could we clarify this time these messages are really from with the UCT? There's a stipulation on that, and let's see below, and then it's like it's an exhibit. J. Clayton, United States Attorney North. Read this through real quick. Coordinated Universal. Okay, Coordinated UT or UTC is 5 hours ahead of Eastern Standard Times during daylight savings time, which is typically between March and during daylight savings time, which is typically between March and early November, UTC is 4 hours ahead of Eastern Daylight Time. Okay, so they're just referencing times. It's stupid. And was that the day? Was that it? That was 58 minutes ago. I think they called it a day at that point. Yeah, let me double check. I think they had a little bit more. This is a boring trial, I'm going to tell you. Okay, wait, no, the judge was adjourned 12 minutes. Okay, so let's do this. Boom. All right. Boom. It's only a couple more lines. It says, right here. It says, Mr. Combs went to your premiere and lunch in London Hotel. She says, yes, he did. Then he says, I just got out of a spiritual therapy session. Cassie, I asked, how did it go? Then he says, he said it's a process. This is leading up to the hotel incident. You say, baby, I want to go to FO so bad. You were asked in your direct and you didn't want to ruin your premiere. Cassie says, sure. Mr. Combs says, if we start at 7 p.m. and go to 4 a.m., you can get enough rest after. Cassie said, yes. Jeez. He says, he's saying it'd rather be a shorter than usual freak off, I guess. And Cassie says, that's how I would understand it. He says, what do you say? She says, Carrie is here. We can't do it at my house. Then he says, you say that guy is sick. I'm not going to ask what you meant. So you were turning to Johnny. Was he a dancer or an escort? Cassie says, we hired him as a dancer, but he did what an escort does. And he says, do you remember the beginning of this freak off at the Intercontinental? She says, not really. Okay, so this is that short session where she had to go to premiere after Diddy wasn't done with her, and this is where he kicked her. I love how they end it right here. So then they go, do you remember the beginning of the freak off in the Intercontinental? She says, not really. Then Diddy's lawyer says, the drugs were bad MDMA, right? Cassie says, I have no idea. Then the judge says, it's 5 o'clock, jurors may go home. It's just like it's over, right, when you're getting into this, right? All right, so then they dismiss. Boring. It's like, okay, it's like, this is boring. Like, what are we gonna, what is this gonna do? Okay, a Diddy's I'm gonna be honest, okay, so blackmail maybe, right, for trying to show her the tapes. I know it's only the 4th day in the trial, but we're not getting to anything here. We're not talking about flying escorts in, girls in. It's a lot of blackmail and toxic relationship stuff. we kind of get that Cassie was kind of into this, just wasn't into the abuse and control, right? Who would be? That's like disgusting, right? But she was into the freaky stuff because most girls wouldn't. If you're not into it, you're not into it. You would have moved on. Nothing's worth that, right? But she wants to make him happy. No girl wants to make a guy so happy that she's willing to like get pissed on and like rub things on people's nipple. It's like, come on, man. You got to be into this a little bit. I know her husband right now is like, what? I'm in too deep. I'm in too deep right now. Anyways, we'll see how tomorrow goes. But I have a feeling this is going to be a snooze fest. I mean, that's it. He just, it's a snooze fest. Then you're going to have Gina come up. She's going to say some other stuff. Who knows what Young Miami did, but she's not going to testify. She should have. She could have got some money. Gina, I wonder if she ever got any money. Then you're going to have some staff members testify to him being a piece of crap. And them doing his blackmail bidding and all that kind of stuff. I mean, what is the punishment for blackmail? That's not. I don't even think that's one of the charges. But what is punishment for blackmail? 1 year in prison or a fine. Put it for blackmail federally. All right, so a year in prison. It's a federal offense that carries up to a 1 year in federal prison or fine. I mean, that seems like all they're going to get him on. Let's see. Diddy charges. They ain't going to get him on a RICO. Let's see. List of charges. Let's just go over this real quick. All right. So it's a federal criminal case. Racketeering conspiracy charge. I don't see how they're going to prove that. Kidnapping, drugging. It seems like she took these. She's saying she basically took these drugs willingly, right? Kidnapping, drugging, coercing women into sexual activities. Sometimes using firearms and threats of violence. Okay. I'm not seeing anything where, like, threats. Yep, that maybe a year. In a raid in Los Angeles mansion, they found supplies that were used for orgies and freakoffs. Cool. He faces a number of cases against him. 100 women and men came from across the U.S. and had filed lawsuits. I mean, if anything, Diddy's going to just lose $100 million. Let's say that, right? If he has to settle a lot of these things. Some people say they were gang hard R-word by Diddy. That might be hard to prove. Yeah, but they got R. Kelly. But R. Kelly was really kidnapping girls, in a sense, So, we'll have to see how this goes. But I don't see... I see Diddy's over after this. His legacy's tarnished. I say maybe he does another year or two with house arrest and then has to face all these civil cases. Loses $200 million. Has to sell a lot of his mansions and stuff. Is disgraced. I'm not seeing anything beyond that. We'll see, though. Maybe I'm wrong. Can they introduce new charges of blackmail? We'll see. I think this is really just a humiliation. To humiliate him and just have him pipe down, With that whole liquor thing, he was getting a little too crazy. They were like, nah. We got to settle down, buddy. Maybe.